love my drum. I got that up at Mount Shasta about a year ago. Very happy with it. It's really, I invite you out here in San Francisco to come and take a look at it. It's really just made really wonderful by a real artisan up there in Mount Shasta. Hello everybody. Welcome back on ACIM Gather, and hello all of you who are watching on YouTube. Thank you for joining in. Thank you for watching this video. So happy you are here. Watch all of our videos. They are wonderfully and lovingly prepared by Reverend Kelly, our assistant minister here at Community Miracle Center. Okay, the title of my presentation today, my talk, Lawns of Heaven. And I asked Reverend Kelly, when she was doing the program, to find a picture of just wonderful grass. So if you look at the program, you see the picture there, just wonderful, lush, green grass. That's what I'd like us to hold that image of. Lawns of heaven, lush green. So when A Course in Miracles talk about the lawns, or the lawns of heaven, it's really like the front lawn of heaven. Like there's Heaven's Gate, the gate that would lead into reality, into heaven, and then right in front, there's a beautiful, lush, wonderful lawn. I wonder who the gardener is. I guess, you know, Buddha, Confucius, I don't know, maybe Jesus. Maybe they all take their turns out there watering, you know, making sure that it's really great, mowing it when it gets the right height. I can just feel it and smell it. So I'd like us to hold that image a little bit. A Course in Miracles talks about Heaven's Gate, or the gates to heaven, or the gate to heaven. I mean, it uses that metaphor. That's a real metaphor. Some people, A Course in Miracles has metaphor. Okay, the gate of heaven, real metaphor. I haven't got a good image of a gate yet, but I'm working on it. So I did a quick search this morning, and I believe I found 17 or 18 references to the gates of heaven. People don't realize that that is referenced that frequently in A Course in Miracles. So the gate of heaven is the door, and once we pass through the door, we will be in reality. We will be in heaven. And it's very clear that that door is opened by God, not by us. It is only our job to get to the lawns of heaven. That's all. It is our job, it is our task to get to the lawns of heaven again, that green, grassy, wonderful, soft, lush, life area right in front of the gate, where the gardener is making a real attempt to just keep it beautiful. And there's so many quotes I could quote. So I just picked this one. Today's idea takes another step toward quick salvation, and a giant stride it is indeed. So great the distances that it encompasses, it sets you down just short of heaven. See, just short of heaven, just right on the lawns. With the goal in sight and the obstacles behind, your foot has reached the lawns. And go with the lawns again, that welcome you to Heaven's Gate. The quiet place of peace where you await with certainty the final step of God. So I think that sums up really the whole teaching of A Course in Miracles, actually. And people don't think about this a lot. A Course in Miracles is not preparing us to go to heaven. We can't be involved with that step. That's God's step. But A Course in Miracles does give us all the instruction that we need to get to the lawns, to get to that wonderful, green, grassy, lush, beautiful place. And I think we all have really good images of lawns, especially in the United States, but in other countries as well. Because even if you live in a city and you don't have a front yard and you don't have a lawn, there's no lawn in front of this building, we live in a society, in a country with parks. And those parks are public lands. They belong to all of us. We all have lawns. Just go to Golden Gate Park, sit in the meadow. That is your lawn. It's as much your lawn as anybody's lawn. That's our lawn. And, if you just think about the parks that we have in this country, it's like every section of government, it seems like, every geographic section of government has its own parks. Cities have their own parks. Counties have their own parks. When we have our picnic up at San Bruno Mountain every once in a while, that San Bruno Mountain Park, that's a county park. States have their own parks. The government, the United States government, the country has its own park. We have an incredible national park system in this country. It's unparalleled. I did a quick search this morning. We have 59 national parks, huge national parks in this country. You know, that would be a great bucket list, wouldn't it be, to spend some time and go to all 59 of our national parks. The first national park was Yellowstone, and Ulysses S. Grant in 1872 made Yellowstone into a national park. You know, we have Yosemite not too far from here in San Francisco. When I lived on the East Coast, Acadia National Park, Mount Desert Island up in Maine, gorgeous. The Everglades in Florida, a national park. We just have all kinds of wonderful national parks. And also the National Park Service maintains the national monuments and the national recreation areas. So I don't know how many of those there are altogether if you really add them up. And we got the Golden Gate National Recreation Area here, not really considered a national park, but sort of a national park. So, I mean, just think of the countless beautiful nature lawns that are there for us to claim as our own. Just a little bit of information. The current National Park Service was commissioned by what's called the Organic Act in 1916. And the statement in the Organic Act that established the National Park Service was this: to conserve the scenery and the natural and historic objects and wildlife therein, and to provide for the enjoyment of the same in such manner and by such means as will leave them unimpaired for the enjoyment of future generations. So, I truly believe thinking of the lawns of heaven worked really well for all of us in our society, because even if we don't have our own lawns, we have just incredible lawns everywhere we go and travel. Just find a park with a beautiful lawn and it's yours. You know, take off your shoes, walk in it barefoot when it's nice and green. Just think about how wonderful that is. Another quote says, "Your foot has reached the lawns that welcome you to heaven's gate, the quiet place of peace where you wait in certainty the final step of God." I just repeated that one, because it's so important, just this image. And I don't hear this talked about a lot, and yet this is a very common image in A Course in Miracles. The one that I used in the reading, I also love. And it says, "And all the loveliness which they concealed appear like lawns of heaven to our sight, to lift us high above the thorny roads we traveled before the Christ appeared." Okay, so the thorny roads. We traveled on thorny roads, things that were scratchy and prickly, and now we're reaching the lawns of heaven, which are soft and smooth. So, I mean, before I said, you know, take off your shoes and think about it, I mean, you know, we're just here visualizing. Take off all your clothes. Just for a moment. Metaphysically, in your mind. Just roll around naked in those wonderful, soft, green, lush grasses. And just imagine that Jesus has just been out there cutting the lawn, so it's like, has that fresh cut lawn smell. That's what we're here to do. We're here to get ourselves to the lawns of heaven and get away from the thorny roads. So, I've had quite a few thorny road experiences as of late. I've talked about them here. And I had a remembrance of them this week. And then I had an experience this week that took me out of those thorny roads and put me back in the lawns of heaven. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. As I've mentioned, I'm an administrator of a large Facebook group, and I went through an experience for a couple of months where I got really heavily criticized, and I thought the challenges were really rather cruel. You know, at least in their statement. I know behind all those is a loving, holy child of God, and it's my job not to see the cruelty, but to go beyond. I know all that. But in form, they were pretty thorny. And a lot of them focused in on my sexuality, some real personal stuff, and they used my presentation in Las Vegas to attack me, called me an exhibitionist, a sex addict, and all kinds of things. People who got afraid to watch it, they said Reverend Roxy and I performed a sex act on stage. Okay, so did Reverend Roxy and I perform a sex act on stage? I don't remember that happening. I watched the video. I don't see that happening, but people said that, and then people don't even want to watch the thing because they expect something really awful or challenging, and it really isn't anything like that. And a lot of what I actually shared in the presentation at Las Vegas that gets missed was really a lot about mental illness and my challenges with that, and all those things about body image that that we're all challenged with. So a couple of weeks ago, I had an opportunity to have a glass of wine and chat with Dr. Bob Rosenthal, who is the right now the co-president of the Foundation for Peace, and along with Tam Morgan, and the author of a wonderful Course in Miracles book called From Plagues to Miracles. And he's becoming quite a name in the Course in Miracles circuit as a presenter now, because he is willing to go out there and speak, which is very different from former presidents or former people from the Foundation for Inner Peace, which at least for the last 20, 25 years haven't really done that. They did in the very beginning, Judy Scutch, but they haven't done that in a long time. So Bob Rosenthal and Tam Morgan somewhat are out there speaking. So I was having a glass of wine with Bob Rosenthal. Bob Rosenthal is a psychiatrist, a medical doctor. He is a psychiatrist. And so I was talking to him about my Las Vegas presentation, and he had heard that it was very controversial, but he really didn't know what it was about. He had actually got it confused with my New York presentation, and he thought it was the one where I challenged the FIP book, and I go, no, the Las Vegas presentation was the one where I took off my clothes. He looks at me, he goes, you did? I go, yeah. So we chatted about it, and I said, it's a wonderful video. I says, let me send you a link. Reverend Kelly prepared it. She made it really funny, really captured the mood of it. So let me give you a link to it. And he goes, okay, I'm really busy, but as soon as I get a chance to look at it, I'll let you know what I think. So this week, he sent me just the most loving, wonderful email about that right when I was in the middle of not doing particularly well, feeling like I was on some particularly thorny roads, feeling, scratched up and prickled a little bit by the world. And all of a sudden, just reading the things that he said just took me from those thorny roads, and it helped me be forgiving to the people who said some really negative things. It helped me to forgive myself. And it put me right there again on the lawns of heaven, rolling around in whatever stage of undress, and just feeling that wonderful, lush, light green grass. I'm just going to share a couple of things that he said. I don't have time to read the whole thing, plus I'm not guided to. We might publish it somewhere. He says we can publish it. And he says, as for what you shared, there is such stigma about mental illness and the meds used to treat it that I'm always delighted when someone steps bravely forward and outs his or her bouts with it. So on that count, I applaud you. So, just that a psychiatrist would say that and get that was, a big part of my message there. My message really wasn't, I wasn't there to be an exhibitionist and a sex addict. I was there to make a statement. And then I had a little dialogue with him about shame and guilt. He likes to really make a distinction between shame and guilt. And he says that, shame isn't talked about a lot in A Course in Miracles because at the time that it was being channeled, guilt was the big thing. Guilt was the big thing with Freudian psychoanalysis. Helen Schuckman and Bill Thetford were Freudians. Guilt was big in her mind. They didn't talk about shame a lot at that time. And so some people in A Course in Miracles circles just see shame and guilt as being the same thing. He goes, but they're actually a little bit different. Guilt is when you feel bad about something that you did. You did this thing, you feel bad about it, you feel guilty. I did the Las Vegas presentation. Now sometimes I feel bad about it. I feel guilt about it because it affected something so negatively. We lost members because of it. But shame is when you feel bad just because of who you are. just because of who you are and what you are. Somehow you're just quite not good enough, and there's something wrong with you inherently at your core. He goes, that's shame. And this is just a short abbreviation about what he said. He goes, interestingly, shame is rarely mentioned in A Course in Miracles, in marked contrast to guilt. One of the things I learned in training is that the cure for shame is exposure. Ideally, gradual exposure, and always in a safe setting. If we expose whatever was deemed shameful in an unsafe setting, it only gets reinforced. That happened a little bit. So when I watched your talk performance, I saw you letting go of the past through exposure of what had once brought on shame in what you consider to be a safe setting. And this did take place in Las Vegas, after all, the queen of shameless towns, as you noted, with strippers doing their thing only a short distance away. The result? The shame that is inherent in bodies got exposed for what it is and reversed when you displayed it so brazenly. But in the context of a helpful talk on transcending bodies and division, sure, it provoked shame in some audience members, but overall, mission accomplished. So that helped me. First of all, it was just wonderful to get the kudos from him, but also just to realize that what was going on with the people who reacted so negatively was that I triggered their shame. The presentation triggered their shame. And that's why some people walked out. And that's why some people had to quit our organization afterwards. Because shame sucks, let's face it. It doesn't feel good. And you want to get away from it. And what I did provoked their shame. And so, officially, I forgive them. I get it now. I see, I can experience it because, if you watch the presentation, I talked about my own shame for having large breasts for a man, my own shame about not understanding reproduction and nursing females. I talked about all of that in that presentation, those shameful early childhood experiences. I know how awful that feels. My presentation triggered shame in some people, and so I understand, and I can forgive them, and I can forgive myself and not have to indulge in guilt anymore. So I officially forgive everybody and myself. And Course in Miracles tells us that forgiveness is the only thing still in the world in power, and yet the bridge to heaven. So it is forgiveness that is the bridge to heaven's gate, to the lawns of heaven. By forgiving them, by forgiving me, I just put myself once again on those lawns. It says, forgiveness brings no little miracles to lay before the gate of heaven. There we are again. And I say, let's just lay ourselves before that gate of heaven, roll around in that grass. All learning is a help or hindrance to the gate of heaven. That was a learning, I get closer to the gate of heaven. Think not the way to heaven's gate is difficult at all. Nothing you undertake with certain purpose and high resolve and happy confidence, holding each other's hand and keeping step to heaven's gate song is difficult to do. So we're on our way to heaven's gate. We have a song in our minds, heaven's song, that helps us get to heaven's gate. And there the lawns of heaven are really just ours to roll around in and just to forgive in, whatever little bit of forgiveness we may still have. And just let go of whatever shame you may have, for whatever reason. Whatever thought that says in your mind that you are not just good enough just because of who you are. It's just like guilt. It's just like feeling bad about something you did, feeling bad about what you are. It's all wrapped together, shame and guilt. Let it all go. Join with all of us here at Community Miracle Center, rolling around in the grass on the gates of heaven, just waiting for that door to open. Amen. Thank you.